Mr. Aframe, how are you?
Good, Senator. How are you?
I'm well. What is rent control?
As I understand rent control, it's some cities may have laws that limit the ability of landlords to raise rent, but it's not something I'm that familiar with.
Okay. Why isn't that a taking that merits compensation from government?
I don't know whether that's been litigated or how that's been resolved. I have never dealt with rent control.
Well, I want to understand what you think about it, how you think. Why isn't it a taking? I mean, your government is taking money from the private owner of an apartment. Why isn't that a taking, just like if they took his property to build a highway?
So I'm not well-versed enough in takings to give you a definitive answer, but I'll give you what I know about takings.
No, tell me what you think. Tell me how you would analyze that.
I would be looking at the precedents that say to what extent can government regulation be permitted.
Suppose there are no precedents. I know we'll stipulate you would look at precedents. But I want to know how you would analyze that case.
Well, the question is, what can the government do as far as regulation where there's still value in the property, but maybe not the maximum, and does that constitute a taking? That's what I'd have to study. I don't know the answer about that.
What you think about it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Hot News Today. Today, we're diving into a fascinating judiciary moment. Senator Kennedy questioned Mr. Aframe on critical legal issues. Topics include rent control, government regulation, and the taking clause. Hit subscribe for more legal breakdowns. Let's jump into it.
What are the competing interests?
Well, the competing interests are the government's interest in housing, I would think, on one side, the property owner's interest in making the maximum amount of money on the other.
Well, why couldn't the government, it has a legitimate interest to help poor people. Why couldn't the government accomplish that by just allocating some tax money to housing subsidy? And then you don't have to take somebody's private property.
That would be a policy decision, another way to try to get at that end. You're asking me whether it's a taking.
Yeah,
and I think that I am not sure that a limit on how much you can make constitute a taking, but I don't know that for sure. I would need to think about that and study that.
Well, aside from if you were back in private practice, how would you analyze that? How would you reach a decision?
Again,
please don't tell me you go look at precedent, because you're not going to find much.
I know that there are cases about regulation that limits the value of property. And I believe that those cases say, unless the property is basically brought down to no value or very little value, it's not a taking. That's my memory.
No.
Senator Kennedy questions Mr. Aframe about rent control. Is limiting rent a government taking of private property? Mr. Aframe admits he needs to look into legal precedents. He mentions the balance between property owners and affordable housing. This question has far-reaching implications for property rights and public policy. Senator Kennedy questions Aframe on rent control as a taking. Why not use tax money for housing subsidies instead of limiting property profits? Aframe acknowledges the government's interest, but notes potential earnings limits could be a taking. This raises the question, what constitutes a taking? Is it only physical property, or can profit limitations be considered a taking?
No,
and that would be relevant, but
I
could be wrong about that.
You can have a highway come through and take part of your property, which diminishes the value, but you've still got to compensate the landowner, and you've got to compensate the landowner for consequential damages as well. That's clearly a taking. Why is rent control any different, Counselor?
Senator,
achieve a government purpose in a less discriminatory way? Why isn't this open and shut?
Well, Senator, without doing more work on it, I mean, I tried to tell you what I would think about it, but I'm also telling you I don't know necessarily how it would come out, and I would need to read and think about it more. But I would think about the government interest, understanding that there is a loss to the owner of the property, and figure out how those interact.
Senator Kennedy asks Mr. Aframe about his approach in private practice. Aframe would look to past legal precedents. He mentions that reduced property value might not be a taking. This highlights the complexity of property law. Question of following precedent. Senator Kennedy asks Aframe about following Supreme Court precedents like Dred Scott and Plessy v. Ferguson. Aframe admits he would have followed them as a lower court judge, despite their immorality. This highlights the tension between legal fidelity and moral principles.
You will faithfully follow precedent, is that right?
Yes, Senator, I will do my very best to do that, yes.
Would you have followed the Dred Scott case?
As a lower level judge,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a yes or no.
I think that, Senator, I mean, there's a
have
fidelity of lower court judges, and hopefully our Supreme Court would make the right decision
You
there.
have followed.
The role of lower court judges. Lower court judges must follow Supreme Court precedent. They ensure the law is applied consistently, even in tough cases. Conclusion. That's a wrap on Senator Kennedy's questioning of Mr. Aframe. This exchange opened up key issues around property rights and judicial precedents. It's a reminder of how complex the law can be. Hit that subscribe button and share your thoughts below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.